welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite series, Dinghai Fusheng Records, and we're going to be talking about Book 3. Now this series has steadily been staying on my top 5 most favorite danmei. I am enjoying it so much and I'm just kind of obsessed with this series. So for my non-spoiler thoughts for Book 3, I loved Book 3. There were so many emotions in this story and it was just so exciting to read it because tensions were high. We're getting so much buildup and we feel like this story, Book 3 in particular, feels like it's building up to something really big happening. And it's just getting you excited for it. And I didn't finish the book feeling let down, feeling like I didn't get enough. The build up and payoff was just so worth it. But also it was very good at creating tension for next series. So it's just a good balance of plot in this book, but also showing you that there is just so much more to come. So it's just getting me really excited for this series. We already know that the silence of all magic is going to end because of the legend of exorcism. So I know Dinghai Fusheng Records is a prequel series, and I've only read book 1 of Legends of Exorcism, but I know magic is not silenced in that book. So clearly Xiangshu and Qinxing are going to succeed on their mission. So it's just a matter of what is it going to look like? Because as of right now, they are sacrificing so much. They are going through so much to complete this mission. And that is just very good because it is kind of hard for a prequel series because you kind of already know how it's going to end. So it is up to the author to still create tension even though we already know how the story is going to end. And I feel like Dinghai Fusheng Records is just very good at still getting us really absorbed in the story even though we already know that the silence of all magic is going to end. And as an author and as a fantasy author, I just find the world building and the magic system so fascinating. And I'm going to get into more of that in the spoiler part of the review. I am reading this book and taking notes because the mythology and all of that is just so fascinating. We get so much good and bad character development from Xiangshu and Qinxing. They feel like real characters, real fleshed out characters. And even when there's bad character development, you just feel frustrated about it, but you don't feel mad. It doesn't feel like it came out of nowhere. The characters and the voices and how they act is just very consistent throughout the book. And I do admire the author for how they manage the pacing of the story because this story, it just starts and there's just climax after climax after climax. It was the same for book 2. It was just battle after battle after battle. So there was a good ebb and flow to it. And again, I just admire the author for that because it was just, this book just keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire time. And you kind of feel bad for the characters because they very rarely get any chance to rest. And you, as a reader, very rarely get any chance to rest. But when the characters do have their rest time, they use it in such a very nice and very sweet way. And you get healed as they get healed in their rest time. So I love the pacing of the story. And 7 Seas must have heard about us complaining about the size of the book because this is the thickness of book 3 and this is book 2. So book 3 is clearly a much bigger book and I really appreciate that because I read books very fast and I don't enjoy a small book. I do not enjoy these small books at all because I go through them so fast. So I do really appreciate that these books are a real length. And just generally about the artwork. So the artwork for book 3 is the same style as it is in book 2 and I don't love or hate the artwork and I just feel very weird about talking about the artwork, at least talking about the style because art is subjective. This is just a matter of what I personally like. And for the artwork for book 3, I wouldn't say I loved it. There was some that I did like more than others, but I think rather I was just confused about the scenes that they decided to depict in the artwork because they just, at least from my perspective, they just seem like really inconsequential scenes. And it would just, I kind of feel like there were so many other scenes that they could have depicted in the artwork. So I was just really confused about why they chose to depict certain scenes. And now we're going to get into some of the spoilers for book 3 of Dinghai Fusheng Records. So if you don't want any spoilers for book 3, feel free to watch one of my other videos. So going back to the artwork for this story, as I mentioned, some of the artwork just felt kind of random in the scenes they chose to depict. So for instance, this scene here, I just don't get why it was decided to make this one into an artwork. I mean, it's a beautiful scene. All the things that happened during this fight, during this scene, why was that one that they chose to depict? And also, there's this one. Now, this one is very beautiful. It is a very beautiful artwork, and I love it. But again, I guess because Xiangshu is just very pretty, so they like to use the artwork to just show how pretty he is. And then there's this one at the beginning of the book. Now, this one I do kind of get. People were attacking Xiangshu because he's a Hugh, and Qinxing was coming to his defense, and he was debating with a bunch of scholars of that time about what it means to be a person, about what it means to be alive. And it was just a very good debate, a very fascinating scene. And then we learned later that Xiangshu was just staring at Qinxing throughout that whole scene, just admiring him. And that's why the person assumed that they were married, because of the way Xiangshu was looking at him. I did find a typo in this book. It was just the one, but it could have been more. I wasn't really sure because I don't particularly notice typos in books. I usually pick up certain sentence structure issues or wordiness or repetitions or stuff like that. I don't usually pick up typos, but typos in published books are just, they happen. And as long as the book is not riddled with typos, I don't particularly mind. I wouldn't take this as a negative for this book because books have typos. And this is something I've noticed about Danmei in general. This is for certain books, that Danmei deals with a whole lot of just long expositions, but they deal with the expositions in a way that, especially those long expositions, they deal with it in a way that doesn't make it like a chore to read. It doesn't feel like I'm back in college trying to slog through some book that I have zero interest in reading. It makes the exposition feel a bit interesting, typically because they break up the exposition. So sometimes the exposition could be the character describing something, and then they'll break it up into dialogue, or they'll interject Qinxing and Xiangshu arguing about something, or they'll break it up with some sort of action. So this section here is a good example of how they broke up the exposition, so it's just not this one long slog of just stuff that's coming at you. So they give us the information, but they also make it entertaining, and I do like that, because there was one Danmei that I read and I dropped the series because the exposition was just, it was so long, and it was just so much information, and I just couldn't get into the story because of all of that. And then you have the lore that is in this series. The lore, as I mentioned, is just so fascinating, and I love it. Most of the reason why I've gotten into Danmei and just why I've just fell head first into Danmei is because I had hit a reading slump, and I mentioned this in one of my shorts. I had hit a reading slump, and I couldn't actually figure out what was going on, because I would be reading these stories, and I generally wouldn't have any problems with them, but I would also have no interest in reading the next book in the series, or I just wouldn't finish the book. I would basically just stop reading the book out of nowhere, and I just would never pick it up. And so when I discovered Heaven and Fisher's Blessings, I instantly fell in love, and I just devoured that series. And that is just what's happened with a whole lot of Danmei. It's because the lore in Danmei is just so different. And I think it was just because I got tired of the Western lore, Western mythology, and I just wanted something different. And also from a fantasy writer and a fantasy world builder, reading this book has just opened my mind to other possibilities possibilities of like magic systems, of other creatures, and how people look at creatures. So, for instance, Xiangshu and Qinqing are fighting this Jiao or dragon, and they're fighting it very publicly. Like the dragon interrupted a very like public ceremony, and so there was the entire kingdom was there watching. Because of the way that people view dragons, they saw that the dragon was attacking their king, and they just assumed that this was an omen that the king was not worthy to be on the throne. But the dragon was evil. I don't know if the dragon was evil. I wouldn't say the dragon was evil. It was more like it was being controlled by someone, and they needed to defeat the person because the person controlling the dragon was evil. But the people didn't see that. All they saw was a dragon attacking their king. So the stakes of their battle was not just that they had to defeat this Jiao because it was being controlled by their enemy, but also because a lot of the people were looking at this dragon and worshiping this dragon and thinking that it was saying that their king was not worthy. So if they lost this battle, that would potentially upset the kingdom, and they could not allow that to happen. And I found that fascinating. And also just all the astrology and how they measure time and how they talked about their birthdays, but also when they talked about the earth veins and the three souls, it was all of that sort of opened my mind to like the possibilities of world building. Because this is for me, I found that if you read the same type of book, the same type of mythology, then your mind just sort of gets trapped into like this sort of bubble. And when you're creating your worlds, your mind just doesn't really go outside of that bubble. It basically goes into what you've known, what you've seen. So for my world building, I usually specifically like search out like non-traditional sort of like fantasy tropes, fantasy images, all that, basically to break that bubble, to expand my horizons. And I feel like Dinghai Fusheng Records has definitely helped that. And then there's also the resentment and how the resentments work, because resentment is basically what's being used in place of magic. So there was no magic, but there's resentment everywhere, mostly because of the war. So people are using the resentment, but there's just negative like consequence that happened when you're using resentment. And Chen Xing with this heart lamp can sort of negate that consequence, but it comes at a price. And again, I just find that fascinating. And then there's also again the earth veins, which is, I guess, put it basically, it's like magic that runs throughout the land, but people can't tap into it directly because this is like pure magic, so it has to be filtered out. And I'm also working on another series that has magical veins running all throughout the land, and certain people can access those magical veins. So it's just, I will be diving deeper into earth veins because I just find that, again, it's just so interesting. And once again, Dinghai Fusheng Records is giving us those epic anime type of fights. Like we get Xiangshu going Super Saiyan, donning like a full golden armor. It was just so awesome to read, and I can't wait to read this scene in the manhwa because I'm so glad that this is one of the images that we got, because we got to see him in like his full martial god glory, and that scene was so amazing. But there was like a deep consequence for that scene. And part of this book is that you get to feel the mental and physical strain that these constant battles are doing to the characters, especially Chen Xing and Xiangshu, because like they're losing so many people. They're just having one battle after another and getting injured, but they can't really stop and take a rest. They can't really stop and process it because they have a mission. And especially with Chen Xing, like he doesn't have a whole lot of time left, so he just doesn't really have the time to really process all of that. And you see kind of like the mental strain begin when he got drunk and Xiangshu took him on the roof so that they can have a moment to themselves. And then you see Chen Xing like crying for just all this burden that has just been placed on him. And you can kind of feel that he feels all of that, but he can't deal with it. He can't really process it because he doesn't have a ton of time left. This is also a found family story, because Chen Xing, Xiangshu, Feng Tianjun, and Xiao Shan, they're all just people who have bonded together as for a shared goal, but also they just like each other. They like being around each other. Like even Chen Xing called Xiao Xian his adopted son. So it's just this beautiful found family story, but also going back to like the battles. These are just people who were pushed into something that is so much bigger than them. They are ants fighting giants, and they are just trying their best. And for Chen Xing and Shang Shu, this really could have been a good time for them to be able to lean on each other since they can't really like process everything. But I will get to this more in a different section. But because Chen Xing is so focused on the mission, like even though he wants to form a bond with these people, he has this sort of like wall up because he knows that he has only a short time to live. It doesn't really occur to him to go to Shang Shu or anyone about the things that are bothering him. He has to hold it in because the mission is all that matters. And I'm hoping that one day in this book he will realize that this is a found family and that he can actually really lean on these people, and not just for the mission, but for his personal life. Chen Xing's situation is just very complicated and just very well written because he can't really think about doing what he wants because this is his mission. He is the last exorcist. He thinks that it is his responsibility to bring back magic. We learn in this book that Shang Shu's mother was actually an exorcist. So he is not actually the last exorcist. He is basically only the last exorcist that can use magic. Kind of. But even then, Feng Qingjun is also an exorcist. So I guess I'm hoping that when we get to the later series, he will begin to realize that he is not in this alone. He is not the last exorcist. This is not his mission to do alone. That he can actually lean on these people for emotional support, not just to lean on them when he needs information or when they need to fight. And I do wish eventually in this series that instead of like focusing on the fact that he only has less than 2 years to live, he would really value the people that are in his life because he is definitely not doing that now. And the Xiu Xing blessing. So technically, yes, that is plot armor, but it's plot armor that used in a very creative way, and it has like a steep price. Now, because this is in my first Danmei, and I know that Chen Xing is not going to die at the end of the series, one of the big tests for this series is how they handle that. Because I'm assuming it's going to be just so dark and so heartbreaking, and we're probably going to get into like Nippon, Erha, Remnants of Filth kind of like heartbreak kind of stuff. At the end of this book, he has about maybe a year and a half left, so there's a good chance we're going to see this, at least the development or the climax of his Xiu Xing like blessing and I guess kind of curse, and maybe in like a book or two. But in terms of his development, it is just amazing to see how far Chen Xing is just come from book 1. Because if I remember correctly, in book 1, he was treating the Hue like they were barbarians. He was getting surprised that they were illiterate and they were intelligent, they can hold intelligent conversations to in this book. And then he went from that to in this book where he was debating with like Han scholars of how the Hue are just people. We're all just people, and he stood by that. And this is a panel from the manual, but he went from thinking that same-sex marriage was like immoral to basically just realizing that he's in love with Shang Shu. And there was no hesitation, there was no fighting. He just accepted it so easily. And instantly when he realized it, he just wanted to confess. And he was just like, he instantly just wanted to confess, and he wanted to kiss Shang Shu. They didn't. And they didn't confess. And that did add to a lot of the tension in the book. Now, in terms of development, I feel like Shang Shu did get the most character development between the two characters. But one thing I find just very funny about this series and about Danmei in general, Danmei usually has this very beautiful character, and they likes to describe their beauty every chance they get. And this is, for me personally, I don't particularly care if the characters are good looking or not, but I do get some entertainment out of it because it gets brought up so much. And that's what it is with Shang Shu. Like, he is very pretty. Everyone thinks he's pretty, and everyone brings up how pretty he is. And it's also funny because unlike Fusheng from Peerless, he doesn't like bathe in that. He's not like, yes, I'm beautiful, and he's not like overly confident about it. He just doesn't care. Shangshu just absolutely ignores anyone who like pokes fun at him, even mentions how pretty he is, because it does come up a lot. But that is just like, I get entertainment out of it because it's just so funny. But going back to just his development, like Shangshu went from not really wanting to be protector to being just all in. He gave up being the great Chanyu, and whenever someone calls him the great Chanyu, he corrects them. He's like, I'm not the great Chanyu, I'm the martial god protector. Like, he is, in this book, he is all in. This passage right here describes like Shangshu absolutely perfectly. And Shangshu was the one who fell first. And so in this book, you basically see him throughout the entire book being in love with Qinxing, but showing it through his actions and not necessarily his words. And I think that he probably admitted it to himself at the end of book 2. So again, book 3 is just him just living that out. And so we see in this book just him trying to be a good partner for Qinxing, a good support for him. So both of them have very significant character flaws that get in the way of them really connecting with each other. Qinxing, he just has his wall up because he only has a short time to live, and Shangshu is just quick to anger. And you see him working on that, and he's not really as quick to anger as he was in the previous books. And also Shangshu is just really bad at communicating with people, but you do see him trying to communicate better with Qinxing. It's just that, again, he hits this wall with Qinxing, and instead of just trying to push against that wall, he just stops. He just stops communicating. He just goes silent. And then they don't make any progress in their relationship. And I am quiet myself. I don't really talk a whole lot, so I do kind of get that. I do kind of sympathize with that. That is very difficult to like have meaningful conversations with people. But also it's just that sometimes when someone talks to you about something, your brain just can't come up with a response. And I feel like Shangshu is dealing with that. He wants to say something, but he just doesn't know what to say. And so he stays quiet, which causes Qinxing to have a lot of insecurities about. And just like all the other characters, Shangshu is basically someone who keeps getting thrown into situations he doesn't want to be in. I didn't get the feeling that he wanted to be the great Chanyu. He just did it because his father passed and that was his role to take. His people needed a leader, and Shangshu loves his people, and he was in a position where he can help them, so he did. In this book, I feel like we are seeing a Shangshu who is doing things because he wants to do them, because he has a passion for them, and not just because this was a situation he was put into. And I feel like he's allowing himself to be vulnerable, to show vulnerability around his new family. Because as I mentioned before, he discovered in this book that his mom was an exorcist. And she wasn't just an exorcist, she was an exorcist who traveled to the future from 300 years in the past. And that shook him up a lot. And he showed that he allowed himself to be vulnerable. I mentioned before that Shangshu went Super Saiyan, and that was at a steep price. Because when Shangshu uses his powers, he takes it from the Heart Lamp, and the Heart Lamp takes the powers from Qinxing's soul. So when he used that amount of power, it caused Qinxing to go unconscious for 3 months. And like, they didn't know when he was going to wake up. And when he did wake up, like, you can see just the sheer relief that Shangshu felt. And Shangshu spent that entire 3 months just caring for him. Around that time is when Qinxing realized that Shangshu like really cared about him, and that he would really be upset when Qinxing was gone. And that was when he realized he was in love with Shangshu, but also when he vowed to never tell Shangshu that he only had 2 years to live. And if I'm remembering correctly from Shangshu from the first book, he was just very guarded. He didn't really like outsiders. I wouldn't say he disliked Han, the Han people. I was thinking more like he knew what they thought of him, and he assumed that they thought that he was the barbarian. So it is nice to see that he is not as guarded. He is allowing himself to show a various range of emotions around Chen Xing, who is Han. As he interacts with the Han people, you do kind of realize why he was so guarded, because they don't treat him well at all. Going back to that scene where Chen Xing was debating the Han people, like they were really just gonna kind of throw him out just for being half Hugh. You do kind of get why he was this wall that he had. As opposed to Chen Xing, who is just firmly keeping that wall up, you see Shang Shu just steadily bringing that wall down brick by brick. And then we get to the end, which kind of broke my heart. After Chen Xing was unconscious for 3 months, Shang Shu absolutely did not want to use the Heartland. He wanted to find another way, but he wanted to fight in a way that didn't require the Heartland. But we get to the end of the book where Chen Xing was pushing Shang Shu to use the Heartland. And Shang Shu was just like, no, I don't want to do that. And then Shang Shu asked him, do you have any other desires in your heart other than this mission, other than fighting this Jiao? And Chen Xing basically said no. He said, no, I don't desire anything else. The mission is all that's important. And if you are not on board with this mission, you can leave. And that broke my heart, because that was after he had witnessed and he had acknowledged all the care that Shang Shu has been putting into him. Like, he admitted that Shang Shu cares about him most in this world. So for him to say something like that to Shang Shu, it did really hurt him. And I kind of feel in this book, it did fracture their relationship a bit. The book ended shortly after this scene, so we don't fully get like the full weight of it. After Chen Xing said that to him, Shang Shu did go Super Saiyan and he defeated the Jiao. And Chen Xing, he ended up unconscious again. But he was only unconscious for like a couple of days because Shang Shu came in and helped him. But when he woke up, Shang Shu was just very distant and he didn't talk to him a whole lot. And when Chen Xing apologized to him, Shang Shu basically didn't accept it. So it's got me kind of fearful about what their relationship is, because I kind of feel like, again, that him saying that Shang Shu should just leave was just kind of heartless. And it seems to have hurt Shang Shu a lot. I don't really think that the partnership is going to end or anything, but it's just they were building so much towards having like a really good partnership, and I kind of feel like this sort of fractured it in a way. But we won't really know how until we get into book 4. But this series is just keep getting darker and darker and darker, so I'm kind of a bit scared of book 4. Is book 4 going to be like Meat Bun Airha levels of dark, or is it going to be like QJJ Volume 6? So I'm a bit scared for book 4 because there's this fracture in this relationship, but also, as I mentioned, this series seems to be building towards something. I'm anticipating that the story is going to get really dark before it gets any better. But in general, I just find Danmei to be just so fascinating because of all the characters, because Danmei seems to really focus on the characters and their development and their relationship, and because you get so invested in the characters that it doesn't matter if there are certain like world building things, certain plot things, certain political things that you maybe don't get, or it maybe just passes you by, because you do get the individual stakes for each character, but also just the characters just feel so human, and I really enjoy that. I just find Dinghai Fusheng Records, the characters and the world building and the magic system, I just find it just so refreshing. And I am kind of looking forward to book 4, despite it potentially being a fairly dark book. But so have any of you checked out Dinghai Fusheng Records book 3? Let me know what you thought.
One quick thing before you go. I created a fantasy world building template. It's an editable template. It has 100+ questions to ask yourself as you create your fantasy world. It has space for image inspiration, for research notes. The template is available on my Etsy store. Link in description. Till next time.